Welcome back to The Savvy Psychologist. I'm your host, Dr. Ellen Hendriksen, and I'll help you meet life's challenges with evidence-based research, a sympathetic ear, and zero judgment. Transgender individuals seem to be everywhere these days, from Laverne Cox to Bruce Jenner to Jeffrey Tambor, who isn't trans but plays one on TV. The transgender movement is making headlines. But this week, we'll look beyond the celebrities and offer some FAQs about everyday trans men and women. For this episode, I felt unqualified to represent a community that's not my own, so I got some expert help. Big thanks to listener Gabrielle Hermosa, advocate and public speaker for the transgender community, who generously offered her guidance in the writing of this episode. Gabrielle furthers transgender awareness, educates, and makes a positive difference all across the country. So, let's start with the basics. Question number 1. I've heard the term gender identity tossed around. What exactly is that? So, this is the heart of the matter. Your gender identity is your internal idea of yourself as a man or a woman, or something outside that binary, but that's another podcast. Gender identity is individual, but it also aligns you with a group, namely those who share your gender identity and all the cultural trimmings and trappings that go along with that group. Social roles, clothing, mannerisms, posture, speaking style, the list goes on. If you were born into a body where your outer parts and your inner identity match, your term is cisgender. That's C-I-S gender, from the Latin for on this side of. Trans comes from the Latin for on the other side of, like a transatlantic flight. So, if you're a word nerd like me, transgender literally means on the other side of gender. And you can't will yourself into a different gender identity any more than you can will yourself to be 2 inches taller. On the inside, you get what you get. So, in the case of transgender individuals, it's much more feasible, not that it's easy, to change the outside to match the inside. Some trans folks do this through clothing, hairstyle, and makeup, and some use hormones or surgery, though that's expensive and seldom covered by health insurance. Question number 2. This sounds different than being gay, straight, or bisexual, is it? Indeed it is. Gender identity is different than sexual orientation. Each of us has both. While your gender identity is who you are, your inner sense of being a man or a woman, your sexual orientation is based on to whom you're attracted, romantically or sexually. You're straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. And transgender people are as varied as cisgender people. You might be transgender and straight, cisgender and lesbian, transgender and gay. The combinations go on and on. Question number 3. Why have I suddenly been seeing this everywhere? Why is the trans movement such a big deal? Gender is a big deal. Everything is gendered, from restrooms to entire languages. And not internally matching your assigned biology creates some pretty serious dissonance, especially when the world creates roles and expectations based on the outer appearance that isn't truly you. Trans people aren't new. There have been trans individuals since the dawn of humanity. But the new visibility and validation of transgender individuals is such a big deal because it draws attention to a community that has struggled in the margins, at least in this culture, for hundreds of years. For instance, it's estimated that 41% of transgender individuals have attempted suicide. That's almost half, which tells you how difficult it is to live in a body that doesn't match who you are. It's easy to spiral into hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness when strangers disparage you daily on the street, your family rejects you, or you feel like you're living a lie. And the workplace isn't much better. Transgender individuals have twice the unemployment and are 4 times more likely to live in poverty than non-transgender folks. The vast majority of trans individuals also report they've been harassed or discriminated against at work. Indeed, it's still legal to fire someone for being trans in 32 states. Question number 4. So the goal is to look like your target gender? Well, yes and no. Interestingly, the media hypes transgender folks who not only look like their target gender, but are attractive to boot. Laverne Cox has some serious curves. Aidan Dowling, the trans man who, as of this writing, is leading the Men's Health Ultimate Man cover model contest, is seriously ripped. So, even with the trans movement marching firmly along, it's particularly challenging for trans individuals who look like a man in a dress or a woman with a man's haircut. Transgender individuals who look like their target gender can pass or live their lives without being followed by double takes and pointed fingers. By contrast, when a trans individual doesn't pass, despite some fierce eyeliner skills or a handsome suit and tie, it's called being read or being clocked, which is the beginning of, at minimum, stares and stupid questions, and at maximum, name-calling, violence, or even hate crimes. For some individuals, being able to pass is really important. It's an external validation of their internal self. It's a sense of congruence. The outside matches the inside. Other trans individuals don't care whether they pass or not and welcome disrupting others' assumptions. Either way, celebrating only those transgender individuals who can pass reinforces the erroneous idea that there's only one way to be a woman or one way to be a man. Question number 5. The pronouns are so confusing. Which ones do I use? Well, it's okay to ask. In general, however, if someone identifies as transgender, you use the pronoun of his or her target gender. So, a transgender woman is a woman who was assigned male at birth and would likely appreciate her and she. That said, many transgender individuals might not be quite so sure themselves about preferred pronouns. Bruce Jenner, for instance, in his recent interview with Diane Sawyer, referred to himself currently as he and referred to his future self as she. So, be patient if preferred pronouns change back and forth over months or years. Figuring this out is a process. And while you should refrain from peppering a transgender colleague or acquaintance with personal questions, particularly about sex or medical procedures, it's definitely polite to ask what pronoun they'd prefer. Question number 6. Okay, I feel a little better about the pronouns, but I'm still unprepared. How do I talk with a trans individual without walking on eggshells or sounding like an idiot? At the end of the day, trans people are just people. Talk about the weather, the playoffs, the Nordstrom sale, or how the Apple Watch is overhyped. Whatever you talk about with anyone. That said, remember our episode on racial microaggressions? You're pretty for a dark girl. You're so articulate. Same concept with trans individuals. Stay away from well-intentioned but ultimately insulting comments. Wow, you look just like a real woman. Or what's your real name? Or are you pre-op or post-op? Instead, simply say, love those shoes. Or, better yet, it's so nice to meet you. If you've learned something from a Savvy Psychologist episode, let me know by subscribing. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, or subscribe to the newsletter at quickanddirtytips.com/newsletters. With the newsletter, you'll get exclusive content like whether more sex really makes you happier or the psychology of internet trolls delivered straight to your inbox every other week. So again, to sign up for this and other newsletters from your favorite Quick and Dirty hosts, just head over to quickanddirtytips.com/newsletters to learn more. That's quickanddirtytips.com/newsletters. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Dr. Ellen Hendriksen. And again, huge thanks to listener Gabrielle Hermosa for her guidance with this episode. You can connect with Gabrielle on her website, mycdlife.com. That's my letter C, letter D, life.com. And next week, by listener request, we'll tackle a tough topic: why some people seem to get into one abusive relationship after another, what you can do to help, and how to protect yourself in the process. In the meantime, a transcript of this episode and the other 70-plus Savvy Psychologist episodes are always available on quickanddirtytips.com/savvy-psychologist. And of course, the Savvy Psychologist is strictly for informational purposes and doesn't substitute for mental health care from a licensed professional. Thank you again. I'll see you next week for a happier, healthier mind.